Welcome to today's episode of Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, a licensed professional counselor, owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, a Colorado-based therapy practice, and creator of this podcast. My goal is to use this platform to help others find their voice as we share our journeys and show support as we learn more about ourselves in life. Growth happens when we get uncomfortable, which happens when we sit with new ideas we haven't sat with before. I hope that we can work on this journey of personal growth and understanding together. As a disclaimer, there may be swearing in this podcast, but sometimes we get caught up in the human experience. It happens. And sometimes we can talk about difficult or activating topics. So maybe put on some headphones if you need to, and remember that support exists for you if you want it. Last episode, we talked about the incredible friendships the four of us share between Ethan and Elliot, Ray and I, and then, the four of us all together. And we ended on this idea that sometimes our own anxieties, worries, or patterns get in the way of our relationships. And we start off right there where we ended. And we talk about recognizing that those old patterns and belief systems might not actually be true. And if we can challenge ourselves to move past them, we can build stronger connections and deeper trust with the people who we love. We also talk even more about strong friendships, sharing appreciation, and talking about how we've grown over the years because of our friendships. So with that, let's get started and see if we can build some insight today.
Well, and one of my favorite things that I always say is I separate out me from the thought. So I'll be like, my anxious brain is telling me this. Like logically, I know it's not true, but like this is the story my anxiety has decided is true tonight. And like, I need you to know that that's what my anxious brain is telling me so that we can navigate this and you can like tell me it's not true or help me figure out what's actually going on in your head instead of just giving into that thought and believing he's mad at me or annoyed at me or upset with me for some reason.
Well, there's actually been a couple times where you were like afraid to talk to me about something. And I can't really think of any specific examples, but my reaction to you telling me how you were feeling about something was like you knew I would respond that way, but your anxious brain gave you 1,000 other ways that I would respond. And that's what you were thinking about. That's where your brain went to.
Yeah. And I sometimes have to take a minute, even though I know he's going to respond with compassion and love, to like convince my anxious brain that all of the lies are not actually true. And then I tell him anyway, and he always responds with compassion and love because it's Elliot. And then I almost always burst into tears because I'm like, that's exactly what I thought you were going to say. And it's exactly what I needed to hear. But like, I've been anxious about this for like a week.
And we just haven't been able to talk to each other about it. Yeah.
I think too that if you have that type of transparency and trust because you know that the other person will be honest with you, you can accept that criticism or feedback and have it be more like my action or what happened is what upset the person and not me. Like not internalizing it that way too, which is hard to do with people when you aren't sure that they love you as a person. But that gives you the ability to be like, hey, what you did upset me. Doesn't mean that I don't like you, just the action.
Yeah, that vulnerability is such a important factor in like me staying friends with someone or not. Because I feel like with friendships that haven't worked out, there's always this like inflection point where I have to choose, what do I value more? Having this person in my life and calling them a friend, right? Still keeping them as a friend, or actually being truly vulnerable, knowing that what I say may be interpreted a certain way, or even what I'm sharing might make that person not want to stay around with me as friends. And I, sort of processing the years of friendship I've had with Elliot, like we got over that when we were kids. I never feel that way. I never feel like anything I'm going to share with you is going to hurt our friendship, or that, we can't be vulnerable and share that with each other.
The only thing I can really think of that I remember, like, I don't know how Ethan feels about me, is I don't remember how old we were. but it was like you, me, and another friend who I'm not going to name, but he's from Temple. And like, I wasn't sure how he responded. Like, I was like, I thought this friend was trying to take Ethan. And I was like, and this was had to have been what, like elementary school. Like it was such a long time ago. And I think that
11, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that just us getting past that was just pivotal to our continued friendship. Like I knew, like I think I learned that day that like, Ethan can be best friends with more than just one person. And B, he and I are solid. Like I don't really ever feel as though like Ethan's going to prioritize someone else over me. And even if he does, that's okay. And I think I've learned that a lot through our friendship in that like, hey, Ethan's got a lot of friends. It's not just you,
Well, and you have a lot of friends.
and I have a lot of friends. It's not just Ethan. But like I've learned from our friendship that like there can be more than just one, and we are simply just another part of each other's life. And for me and Ethan specifically, our friendship is a big part of my life. At least I think that learning that no matter who else he becomes friends with, like he and I will always be solid.
It was like passing a test. Like if we can get through this as kids at very formative stages of our lives, then there's really nothing in the future that we know that will drive us apart as friends. We might like not live in the same place. We might have different interests. Our paths, might diverge. But if we can come to that, I think, very mature understanding of connection and friendship and love and partnership, then there's no way that could be severed going forward. No matter how long we, go in between contacting each other, that is such an important lesson to learn.
Well, it's like you guys are on the different paths, but cultivating the trail. You're not letting the forest grow too thick between those paths that you don't see each other anymore. You both equally work hard to make sure that it's maintained so that you can keep in contact and keep seeing each other and keep growing on the same trail together.
Well, and you also continually, like Ray was saying, find connection points. Every time you do call and check in with each other, one of the things that Elliot loves to say, and we talked about it, like a week ago or so, was that you two have kind of gone through similar seasons. You both started dating the two of us around the same time. You started talking about wanting to move in with each other at the same time. Like you two have kind of had these parallel lives next to each other that have allowed you to stay together and process as friends.
Yeah, and I've actually talked with Ethan on the phone about that too. Like I am actually excited that we are both in these like committed, loving relationships at the same time. And we are both like planning out parts of our lives at around the same time. And it is, I think it only stands to draw us closer together with those shared experiences. And I'm just so genuinely excited for not just the future with like Ethan and I, but with you too, Ray and Anna. And like, the idea of like the four of us going on a trip together, sick. I'm so in. When and where, let me know. We'll make it happen. Like that seems like such a good time. And I just enjoy hearing his stories about how you make him feel, Ray. And being able to empathize because Anna makes me feel the same way.
The synchronicity was actually kind of scary because when I met Ray, I'm on the phone over the course of those couple of weeks sharing how I feel, right? Because we're vulnerable with each other, and I'm telling him exactly how I feel about Ray and all of the amazing revelations and experiences that I'm having finding my person. And then about 2 months later, he's like, hey, I have to tell you about this person that I met. And he's using, without realizing it, the same phrases, almost verbatim, that I was sharing with him. And I'm just cracking up on the other end of the line, being like, this is why we're friends, because we're not only, for some weird reason, having these synced up experiences, but we're also feeling and processing it in very similar ways. And we've continued to do that our entire lives. And so it is just reaffirming why we are supposed to continue being friends together.
Yeah.
And that is not something I think I've ever experienced with another friend outside of Elliot.
Yeah. I remember you being like, yeah, so I found myself a climber girl. I was like, damn it, I want to find myself a climber girl. Gosh darn it. And I ended up meeting Anna in a bouldering cave. And it was just such a cool way to kind of experience that. And then I remember calling you, I was like, dude, like I met this girl. You'll never guess where.
Oh my gosh. And when we went to Chicago, we did the climbing double date with the two of you. That was so fun.
Yeah.
Very cute.
One thing I want to add to all of this talk about trust and vulnerability and those connection points. I cannot remember the resource that this came from, but it's something that I say a lot in my sessions, which is we often believe that trust has to come first before we can be vulnerable. But more often than not, we choose to be vulnerable and see how the other person responds. And if they can meet us in that vulnerability, then trust will grow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. I mean, like, how can you learn how you can trust someone without being vulnerable?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you keep your guards up, then you're not going to be able to know how to fully trust them because you're not giving them anything to be trustworthy with. About.
And I remember when I first met you, I had made this mental, intentional choice of whatever the universe sends me, I'm going to be open and vulnerable and see what happens. And then the universe sent me Elliot. And now here we are having this conversation about deep vulnerability. And it's just, if I wonder what would have happened if I had still been guarded, if I hadn't made that choice before I met him. And I'm so happy.
I also think about like knowing how vulnerability and being able to truly express yourself is so important in, for example, making new friendships as adults. That Elliot and I, of course, when we met as kids, we didn't do that, but we have grown up knowing, well, this is what it feels like to have that absolute trust and vulnerability with someone. So when we find it in other people, we recognize it because we've experienced that feeling before. And I wonder if, maybe our childhood had gone differently. And for example, like I'd never really been able to have a lifelong friendship that felt that easy and comfortable and vulnerable, if it would have been harder for me to recognize, meeting Ray, that she was someone else I felt that way about. And not recognizing like, oh, well, yeah, I feel just as comfortable with this person, as I do with my best friend. And maybe that means that we're also best friends. Because I have a really good time with other people I feel this comfortable around, if that makes sense.
I feel like a bar was set.
Yeah.
Like with our friendship, there's like a bar of vulnerability, of the feeling of like, I can just be open and communicative with this person. I think that there is like definitely one of those, I guess like the work has been laid and someone just needs to kind of meet that in order for me to feel completely okay with this person.
Be willing to go into that relationship.
Yeah.
They have to meet the expectations of your best friendship.
And I don't think I really had that with my last relationship. And I learned a lot from my last relationship and I'm very appreciative of it. But there were definitely parts where I had to like tiptoe around certain subjects and, that relationship ended for a reason. And I think, every relationship, friendship, romantic, whatever the case may be, we learn from those relationships, no matter how good or bad they are. And I think it's been really helpful to have such a good relationship with you, Ethan, to have that that bar that needs to be met in order for it to be like, all right, this is real. This is legit.
So, as two men that have such a strong and trusting and vulnerable relationship with each other, do you have any advice or recommendations for any men trying to find bonds and connections in this world?
I I can't emphasize enough the importance of being of allowing yourself to be who you truly are and letting the people around you either accept that and become friends with you or not accept that and just be people on the wayside. Because I think that if you cannot be yourself around your friend, what is the point? Why do I have to put on a different face in order to hang out with this person?
Yeah.
And I think that's just monumentally important. And I want to say since high school, I made like 3 rules for myself with basically everything in life. It was know what makes you happy, do what makes you happy, and don't care about what people think about you so you can be happy. And the idea of like needing to be someone else around other people to me never made sense. And I think that's something that like people are surprised by, that I'm the same person in work. I'm the same person at the climbing gym, in dancing. I'm the same person no matter where I am. I am like, I don't know how to be anyone else, and I don't really care to be anyone else. And finding people who just accept you for who you are is just the only way to go. If you want those long lasting relationships.
And I can imagine it's really tough and it can be disheartening if you want close, enriching friendships and are having a difficult time finding them. But we seek out good, healthy friendships because they enrich our lives. And fake friendships or friendships based on personas or characters that we're playing or trying to amp up or vice versa, don't enrich our lives and are not built to last. And I can imagine it's very difficult to really want that close, vulnerable friendship and having a difficult time finding it. But I think, and feel free to disagree with me, but I feel like it's better to know your worth and only find that really good trust and vulnerable friendship with someone who's going to reciprocate it. And it is better to know that it's out there, but keep looking and hold the faith than it is to try to force something to make it happen. I lean on this quote. I can't remember where it's from, but I lean on this quote a lot that, essentially says, if you want something, put it out into the universe and work towards it, but let go of how it comes to pass. And you have to have the confidence to know that, as frustrating as it might be to not have something you're looking for, whether that's a good friendship, a career that's, fulfilling, that, you want the place that you want to live, whatever aspect of your life that is, it's okay to really want that and to work towards it, but you can't force it to happen any particular way. And so the challenge and the reward, I think, comes from holding out for something that is going to feel right. And that's how I found Ray, and that's how I found a lot of really close friends in my life, is realizing that, it's not the being in a relationship that I want, for example. It's having a partner that I trust and who sees me and I see her through and through. And if it's taking a long time to find that, just means that I'm doing the right thing, because I'm knowing what I'm worth and what I value, and that trusting that it's going to come to me.
Not coming from a male perspective here, but taking it even farther back to the very beginning of like searching for a friend. I think that one of the things before I even get like seriously vulnerable with somebody, which is not admittedly for me, it's not hard to do at all. I'm kind of like you, Elliot, where I'm like, this is me. If you don't like it, then leave. But I feel like the baseline for me is if I feel safe with a person, and that can mean a lot of different things, not just like physically safe in my body, but also safe to ask maybe a silly question or a dumb question to someone and be vulnerable in that way. Like, I remember one of the first things that I said to Raina is like, we might have been a little bit inebriated, but me being like, isn't it just like wild that as humans we have belly buttons that we just hide all the time? And she didn't laugh. Like, she laughed, she kind of giggled, but she was like, yeah, you know what? And wouldn't it be crazy if, and then like kept going with it. And that itself signaled to me that she was safe to express these ideas, to these quote unquote like stoner thoughts or anything like that, where it's just a crazy weird thing that you're thinking of, but it's the safety to be able to say that. And the conversations that come from that are sometimes really unexpected or lead to fun places, and you don't feel like, oh, this person's going to laugh at me, or like, whoa, what kind of thought is that? It's such a more freeing environment. And that's kind of my litmus test for how I decide if someone's going to be a safe friend.
And that applies both to finding new friends and also deciding to stay with or not be friends with someone that you've been friends with for a while. Is maybe I don't feel that way anymore, and recognizing that is also a very important step.
Yeah. So I moved 2 to 4 years every year, like my whole life. I'm just constantly moving, new friendships, new schools, new countries. And so I always had to make new friends. And growing up, I definitely fit into that category that you were talking about, Ethan, of I did put on a persona because I was in a new place, in a new country. I knew nobody. I had to find a friend, right? And every single time, almost without fail, I'd end up in the kind of jock party group. And then I'm not that person. And so after a few months, it just would not fit. And I'd end up finding like my weird, artistic, kind of nerdy, like completely authentic group. And then those are the people that I'm still friends with to this day, And so each time I moved, it's like I couldn't keep that in my head. And I always just went with whoever thought, oh, you look like this. This is the group you should be in. And it wasn't until much later in my life and seeing all these patterns that I realized like I fit best with the people that are a little weird and completely authentic and can be vulnerable. And on day one of meeting me are down to sit down and talk about our past traumas and like childhood patterns that we're trying to get through, And it really is one of those of I learned that I was putting all this extra effort in, but it didn't feel like a persona. It really just felt like I was trying so hard instead of sitting back and giving space and like trying, but noticing who matched my effort. And it's the people whose effort I can match and they can match mine that it becomes that lifelong friendship.
Yeah. I also find like, doing stuff that you're passionate about or that you really enjoy when either meeting new friends or meeting a partner allows you to go in with the intention of I'm just here to be me and have a good time. Whether for me, at least it's dancing, it's climbing, it's like hiking and stuff. And I'm more than willing to do all of that stuff on my own. And, I think there was a time in my life when I was looking for a relationship. And like, let's say I would go into the dance scene with the expectation of like, I want to find someone to go home with. That would not happen usually in that scenario. But when I was just like, I'm just going to be who I am and have fun, that is more attractive to people when they see the passion that you have for what you're doing. And they're just like vibing with you and matching your energy and appreciating what you're putting forward into that environment. Versus the search for it. I think that's something that like is understated a lot of, the cliche of like, oh, you'll find your partner when you're not looking. That kind of holds true. Part of not trying to do something, but just enjoying being who you are and doing the activity you're doing, it is attractive to people because they see that makes you happy. And let's say, you know, in climbing, they can enjoy that with you because usually they also enjoy it. And it's something that you can share.
And on a general level too, like, you know, this podcast is, we're talking about like friendships. Like, I would rather be friends with someone who I see them acting who they are, right? Expressing true self and saying, whoa, I'm really vibing with that because that's very similar to my true self. You know, that's a lot more interesting, and like that steers me towards wanting to be friends with that person rather than someone who's like, I want to try to make friends. What do you like? What are you into? You know, we've talked a couple times in this episode about how important it is to just truly be your authentic self. Well, that makes sense that if, you know, you see someone being their true authentic self, that's the best way to tell, like, oh yeah, that person, I really want to be friends with them because they're expressing the same way that I feel. And you can't do that if everyone's putting up a character or a persona or hiding behind, you know, a social activity.
You don't know who you're trying to be friends with.
Yeah.
So the funny thing that comes to mind is when we're like waiting in the grocery store or something and there's good music on. I think I've had both experiences with both you, Ethan, and you, Anna, where we're all just dancing. Where we're just moving along to the music and everyone else is just standing there like stiffs because they're just worried about what people look at them. Like, that just comes to mind, and it makes me happy thinking that like I can just be in a line bopping to music and y'all join me.
Remember when we salsaed in the Container Store and everybody stopped to watch, and it ended up being an impromptu performance? We're like, people are watching us.
Yeah,
that sounds about right. That for who you two are. I also want to say, you know, because that activity and the way that you two especially express yourselves is incredibly extroverted and confident. And I feel like if you're someone who is maybe more shy and maybe doesn't want to express, you know, those kinds of things, or doesn't have the confidence to do that, or thinks that it's going to be embarrassing, that's okay. And it doesn't mean that you're not also going to be able to find friends that way. It's not about
absolutely.
That person is the life of the party, is lighting up the room, etc. It's that person is so comfortable being themselves. And if that means that they're just chilling kind of, you know, in their own corner, but want that connection, that is, you're just as likely to find a close friend who shares your values, even if that might be less extroverted, less outwardly confident, even performative, right? So it's not about put yourself out there and dance in the Container Store. It's about be who you are, and don't try to force yourself to, like, you know, play up certain parts of yourself just to find a friend.
Well, and let's be clear, in a big party, I'm the person in the corner talking to one other person. I am deeply introverted, but I'm not shy. Like, and that is a big difference for me. So Elliot and I hanging out together in a Container Store, I have no problem dancing with him. If we are in a giant group, I'm kind of off in the corner and I'm going to disappear early and go to bed. Like, and that's who I am. Right.
Yeah. And I'm not saying everyone should be dancing in Container Stores.
No, that's just Elliot.
If everybody's dancing in Container Stores, then nobody's going to be able to watch you.
Yeah. But like, that was just an example of like being who you are, even when the situation doesn't necessarily reinforce that or call for that, you know.
You'll find your people.
I agree. You'll find your people doing what you're passionate about. I know a lot of people who are like really into like D&D and stuff, and I feel like there's 100% a community out there for them. I know a lot of people who love just being gym rats, and there's a community out there for them. I think there's some people for everyone. And the first step is just figuring out who you truly are as a person, and being okay with that, and doing what you can to surround yourself with people who appreciate who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to really quickly build on what Elliot was saying too about like going to the places and doing the things that you want to do first and making friends second. And like what you were saying about not going into a situation being like, who can I make friends with here? Because like, again, bringing up Raina, that was how we met, was that I went to a animal shelter because I wanted to volunteer and hang out with cats because I didn't have one at that time. And then she was in my orientation group, and it was like I did not expect to make friends there at all, just cat friends. And I walked out with a bestie, so it's like you just never know, but keep doing what you want to do and others will show up too.
This conversation is a really good takedown of popularity and social dynamics where like the goal doesn't have to be I want to have a lot of friends. The goal is I want to be really happy. And putting that energy out attracts people who also feel that way and are looking for help the way that you're looking for help. And then you find each other through that goal versus making friends. And especially, there's definitely social dynamics at play when you talk about, people who love to go social dancing versus people who play Dungeons and Dragons. There's this stigma around popularity and outgoingness and the outward display of friendship versus inner comfort and happiness in a small space where you really feel comfortable with people. And I like exploring that idea.
And also along with like the whole idea of popularity and that kind of thing, like I've been called a show off just because and like people say that I like to be the center of attention. I don't mind being the center of attention. It is never my intent. I really don't care to be. It just, I'm so carefree. Like I don't really care. And just because I tend to come in with more energy, more enthusiasm, it just happens to be that way. I genuinely do not try to show off. I genuinely do not try to be the center of attention. And unfortunately, the limelight just, has its way of working its way on me.
So beautiful. And the way that you dance, people can't help but look at you. No, but it is true because I've been social dancing with him. And literally for the first like 8 months, people will be like, hey, so who taught you? I'm like, oh, my partner, that's Elliot over there. Every single person, no matter whether they're a lead or a follow, go, oh my God, he is so fun to watch. Like it is everyone's gut reaction to be like, he's amazing. He just looks like he's having so much fun. And like people are drawn to that. Whereas, my friend groups, we typically meet maybe quarterly and it's like me and 1 or 2 other people at a time. And we just like go to brunch or sit on the couch and talk for a few hours. We'll like craft while we chat. And then a couple hours later, they go home and I'm like, great, see you in 3 months. And like, that's the majority of what I do in my friend groups. But then I have, my climbing group. And then maybe once every 3 months, I go social dancing with him, but it's so late at night and so loud and so many people that I'm like, I love the dancing, but I'm miserable with the grouping of it all. So I enjoy dancing at home in the living room with him. And that's how I show up in it. Right. So similar passions, but we show up very differently.
I want to also add that like, I'm different in this regard. Like I have never really gone social dancing with Elliot. One reason is that I truthfully just like have never really practiced it that much. And, maybe I think I feel a little out of place, but like, truthfully, I just don't feel as comfortable in that specific dynamic of like Latin social dancing as he does. And the way that you have created the space for me to feel that way and to respect how I feel about it is really encouraging. Like, even when I would come out to visit and you're like, well, there's this social dancing thing that's happening tonight. And like, I know I'd have a blast and I think you would too. And for me to say, I'm thinking about it and I just don't really feel that it would be comfortable for me. And you never judge me. You're like, I want to make sure that you're comfortable, that you're having a good time. And that's okay. I've never taken that for granted because not everyone in my life brings that level of respect and judgment. Some of my family members don't even hold that much respect and free of judgment for how I want to feel and what I want to do, where I feel comfortable. So I just want to point that out, that like I've never judged you for loving it, and you've never judged me for not wanting to be in that space. And that's another thing I've really appreciated, especially as adults in an adult friendship now.
Just deep acceptance.
Well, I've never, like, I always offer because I'm passionate about it, and I like
Right.
having other people be passionate about the same things that I'm passionate about because I love it so much. I want them to have something that they love as much.
Right.
But if someone's like, no, I'm not going to be like, well, we're going anyways.
Come on, it'll be fun. Just put yourself out there.
I try not to push people's boundaries because I know that that's their boundaries. And if they say no, that's no. And that's something I've had to work on, actually. I've lost a couple of friends because I pushed too hard. And I have learned through trial and error that I cannot push someone to do something that they are uncomfortable with. Shout out to my buddy Kyle, who like in college, I want to say sophomore year, I kept trying to get them to come to parties at Northwestern with Ethan, where I enjoyed going out and doing that kind of stuff. And he was just way more introverted than me. And it came to a point where he was like, dude, I don't know if we could be friends. And I as hard as that was for me to hear, that was genuinely a huge learning opportunity for me, that if I pushed too hard, I could lose friends. And I just need to accept that that is not what they're into. And let's just do stuff that we both enjoy. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Was it that's like pushing in that way? I feel like comes from a space of conflict and with good intentions, right? But trying to say, like, I think that you would benefit from this, so I'm trying to like get you out of a space of comfort, versus complementary, like, oh, I really think that this would add to how I see you enjoying yourself and the way that I can see you interact in certain scenarios. I was going to share an example of my friend Sam, who in a similar way is a more outgoing, more extroverted, definitely, likes to be the life of the party. And I always felt that I wasn't that. And we worked really well together because he would kind of like pull me up the ladder a little bit of like, oh, well, he's being really outgoing. And if I kind of follow his lead, it can be fun sometimes. And I shared that with him a couple of years ago, that like, I've always really valued that, like, you're always starting stuff and going for it. And he was very vulnerable with me in that moment. And he's like, it's funny you say that, because I never would have felt comfortable doing it if I didn't know that you were there in my corner to follow my lead. Like, if it was just him, he wouldn't have felt comfortable doing it. But because our energies complemented each other, because he knew that if he made an opening, that who I am, I would want to follow because that felt good for me. That's why our dynamic was successful, not because he pushed me off the deep end of the pool. And I never realized that all the years that we were friends, it never occurred to me that he might get something out of my friendship the way that I got that out of his friendship.
Yeah. And how powerful that you were able to share that gratitude, and then you had that vulnerable moment that brought you closer together.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only other question that we didn't kind of already talk about was just if you had any advice you wish you could give to your younger self as you were navigating life.
I think, realistically, everything happened in the way that it needed to at the time that it needed to in order for me to become the person that I am today. So would I change anything? Technically, no.
But what would you tell yourself?
I think reinforcing the idea that just because someone gives you feedback doesn't mean that they hate you. Because, when I was younger, I did a lot of like really tight hugs just because that's, what I enjoyed doing, but it made people uncomfortable. And hearing that it would make people uncomfortable should have just made me stop, or like made me ask more for consent and that kind of stuff. And I think when I was younger, especially at like camp and stuff, there were a lot of times where I should have taken cues, which obviously very challenging for me. But like understood that feedback isn't necessarily negative, it is constructive.
Mhm.
Like it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's just about them, not about you.
It's about, yeah. And like having a little bit more empathy towards like, hey, like they really didn't like this. Oh, I didn't mean for that. You know, I don't think I've ever meant ill intent towards someone and done something that they actively told me not to do with the explicit intent of making them uncomfortable or
Yeah.
you know, anything along those lines. And I think that, you know, learning earlier on in life that taking that feedback isn't a personal affront to my personality or who I am, but like better understanding that, oh, like I can take this and learn from it. Thank you for that feedback.
Mhm. Yeah, my answer is similar and a little different. I completely agree that things happen the way that they were supposed to. I wouldn't want to influence events that had happened or lessons that I learned. I think I did learn constructive criticism a little bit earlier. That has always kind of made a little more sense to me. What I had trouble with, and what I wish I would have been able to come back and help myself as a kid a little earlier, was being in social situations where I tried to do what other people were doing, or I tried to fit into groups that were together out of convenience and then feeling like I didn't belong. So an example would be that percussion group that I was a part of, that absolutely, this was in college, was absolutely a passion of mine. And I loved the performance. I loved the rehearsing. I loved writing the pieces and learning the music. And I mean, I had an absolute blast. That also meant that I was with that group of about 20 people for hours and hours and hours and hours every week for the entire school year. I spent a lot of time with them, not just in rehearsing, but also socially, because we're just doing so much together and team bonding. And truthfully, I never really felt like I belonged so easily in that group. I always kind of saw myself a little bit on the outside. And in many scenarios, I internalized that. And I thought, like, well, maybe like I just need to be a little more social, or just need to be a little more adventurous, or even like, well, maybe one day I'll grow into this, so then I'll just fit in naturally. I'll become a person who's more in this social group, not realizing that I had already done that, and who I had become was just someone who didn't necessarily belong in that social group. And so I wish I'd be able to go back and tell myself, like, it is perfectly okay to be with this group of people who share a similar passion and have as much fun doing this as you, but you don't have to be best friends with them, and it's okay if you're not. And there were other people in that group who did that, and I looked up to them, but I never followed their example. I never had the confidence, to do like what this girl did or what this guy did that year. And like, I had these opportunities to put my foot down and say, you know what, I'm not really into this. And I never did, because I didn't want to feel like I was on the outside. So I wish that and that's just one specific example, but I wish that I would have been able to tell myself, it's okay to have groups of people who are together because they care about certain things, or because they work together, or because you're volunteering with something. And that's different than who your friends are and who you really can feel comfortable and vulnerable with. And I never put the pieces together until many years outside of school. And I wish I'd known that.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And like, I think that was also instilled at camp too.
Yep. Definitely.
And that we're literally with those people for you. I think it was like 3 weeks. For me, it was like 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's a lot of times that I felt very excluded, and there were a lot of times that I felt very included, because they made the effort to include me. But to this day, I still don't really know where I sit in that group. And you know, like I appreciate reaching out to those people every once in a while. But you know, looking back on it, I was in a very interesting place where I like, you know, I'm with these people for so long. And we're like basically like forced to be together and like grow up together. And like we were told, like, you have lifelong friends here. And I, you know, while there are still a lot of people that I still really connect with from who I know from there, it's definitely not to the same extent than when we were actively participating in it.
Right. And that's a tough lesson. Like in that specific example, how are you supposed to tell that to, you know, a preteen or teenager or whatever, you know, age group we were at that time? How are you supposed to tell them, like, yeah, you know, we're all together and we're all in this, and we're all gonna be lifelong friends. But, you know, if you don't get along, that's also fine. You can be your own person. It's like, well, that'll ruin, you know, the camaraderie of the group. You don't want to do that. And it takes some level of time and maturity to learn that lesson. But I think especially now as adults, that is so important. And to not have that expectation anymore is really freeing, because I know that no matter what, if I walk into a scenario or a group or a work team, whatever it might be, I might not walk out of there with any new friends, and that's fine as long as I'm doing what I like doing and we're all comfortable with each other, and you know, that's what's more important. But I'm not going to contort or force myself to try to be friends with these people who is not meant to be.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be friends with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Honestly, I would. That's the one phrase. It's like, hey, Ethan, younger Ethan, you don't have to be friends with everybody. It's okay. Just be yourself.
I want to add on to that you don't have to be friends with everybody, and not all friends are meant to be for life.
Yes.
I think that's something, I don't know where I heard it, but you know, there are friends who are here for a long time. There are friends who are here for a good time. You know, I had quite a few friends who, I had one friend in particular who I at one point was really good friends with. And then they did a couple of things that I really disagreed with. And then, you know, they had this behavior of showing up like 2 hours late to everything. Mm. And I was like, I can't, that is disrespectful of me. That is disrespectful of my time. And I had to get rid of those friends. And like, I appreciate our friendship for what it was when we had it.
But it doesn't have to stay.
It doesn't have to stay. And, you know, maybe I'll reach out every once in a while and like, hey, you know, I appreciated you. But I still haven't reached out to this one.
You never have to. And that's okay.
And I think that's okay, that like some friendships just aren't necessarily made for a lifetime. Some friendships are made to help you grow and learn and be a part of their life and a part of your life. And they don't necessarily need to last, because just as much as we grow as a person throughout our lives, our friendships and our understanding of our friends and, you know, who they are don't always continue to learn and grow with who we are.
They don't align.
Exactly. Which is, again, one of the reasons that I really appreciate you and I's friendship.
Yeah.
Because, or you're in my friendship, because, you know, we've grown together. We continue to, I continue to love and appreciate who you are as a person, and who you have helped me become, and who you continue to help me grow and grow into. And I'm really excited for all four of our futures, you know, just in general together.
Me too.
All right. So you two got to share. Ray, do you have something you'd like to tell your younger self?
Building on everything that you guys said, honestly, of just like also the not everybody's going to be your friend, and also like not everybody's going to like you for no fault of your own. There's definitely been like points, like there was one like example in college where a friend of mine was talking about another person, and I was like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, we should hang out with them. And she was like, well, no, she doesn't like you. And I was like floored by it, because I just couldn't understand why she didn't like me. And it took me a really long time, like that, but that one friend was really helpful in understanding that she was like, it's nothing you've done. You're just not her type of person. And she's not your type of person. So why are you so upset about this? And it's kind of like, yeah, I wish I could tell my younger self, it's like, you're not everybody's cup of tea. And that's fine. Those just aren't your friends. Like you don't have to be around them and it's nothing wrong with you. And so it's like not about, like you said, you don't have to be friends with everybody. I feel very Black Cat a lot of the times into his golden retriever of being like, well, good, I don't want to be friends with your ass anyways. You know? But that's new to adult Ray. Younger me was like very much like, but what did I do to you? And it's now that I'm understanding how I feel about people as well. It's like there are certain people that you just rub me the wrong way and there's nothing wrong with you. I just don't really like the kind of person you are.
Elliot and I have helped each other through a couple moments like that in each other's lives, being like, I just don't understand what happened, and I need someone who knows me so well and is external from my brain and my worldview to explain like what is going on, what happened, why did someone treat me this way. And I needed help, and Elliot needed my help in those moments, you know, to understand and process what had happened with someone that you trust to be vulnerable and honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think that there's been a lot of relationships in my life where maybe I said something or did something or just acted differently and like, you know, let's say romantically, it just kind of ended that relationship. And I was just like, I don't understand.
Interesting how even in how you shared that it was I did something and not necessarily that you grew apart or maybe there was a miscommunication.
Yeah.
Right. You
That's
instantly put it on yourself when it takes two people to be in a relationship and two people to have a miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I do end up putting a lot of that on myself, partially because there isn't that communication of, you know, like we just didn't mesh or something like that. And I do end up being like, well, what could I do differently? Or I feel like a lot of it is, you know, what's wrong with me sometimes. And I've learned to kind of understand that not everyone is meant for everyone and not all people get along with each other. And that's something that I've definitely learned throughout the years. Yeah. But I feel like it's still just so hard to get that, like, hey, I don't think we can be friends anymore. Yeah. And like not take that personally. Like it's like for me personally, I really struggle because I know that I struggle with certain cue reading, or, you know, maybe I don't treat someone the way that they feel they deserve or should be treated. And it's not because I want to treat them differently. I don't want to hurt them, but because
it's a miscommunication and they haven't told you.
Or they just, you know, maybe I'm just not the right person for them, which totally fair.
Not everybody has to like you.
Not everyone has to like me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're all a work in progress too. I mean, I was just talking this morning about an experience last night where I felt like I over-explained myself on a topic while we were out with friends because I was not as confident in like my decision about something. And this morning I was like, why couldn't I have just left it at, I like to do this and not had to explain it? Like, why did I feel like I needed them to understand where I was coming from? So it's like, that is all just a work in progress. And the fact that we
still do that.
Yeah. The fact that we've come as far as we have is such huge steps, but like, there's still so much more we can do to like be confident in our decisions. And
I'll add mine and then maybe we can end it there, which is, I think, almost kind of opposite of what you were talking about, Ray, which is, you know, I felt like in order to have friends growing up, I had to be extroverted. So it's like, anytime I showed up in a space, I had to be gregarious. I had to be willing to go out all the time. I had to be willing to want to go to parties or whatever. And I feel like a lot of that led to nervous system dysregulation, which now looking back on it, I have that language, I have that insight. But at the time I didn't. And so, you know, I just did what I thought I was supposed to do with my friends. And then I'd always end up like crying at the end of the month or like shutting down really hard and like really struggling to feel like I was okay because this is how I'm supposed to be in a friendship. Right. And so I almost wish that I could go back and tell myself of like, you're allowed to slow down. you're allowed to want nights in. And, as an adult, knowing myself, I thrive going out and talking to people once or twice a week max. And that includes climbing and going to the gym. That includes he doesn't count that as socializing. Going to the gym and climbing for him is just working out, but we're always with people. We're always having conversations. There's always noise going around. It counts for me as a social event. So if we go climbing that week, I don't want to go out and see anyone else the rest of the week. And I know this about myself, and I love that I know that, because now I can slow down and I can just chill on the couch and cuddle with Julia and watch movies the rest of the night, the rest of the week. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I wish I had known that I will find my people and I will know how to show up as myself in those spaces with the people that actually fit for me.
Amen.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. That was amazing. Any last thoughts before I stop this recording?
This has been wonderful. I've never had the opportunity to discuss and process my friendship with Elliot before, outside of us, outside of Elliot and I talking about it, or maybe, Ray and I talking about it. But I've really enjoyed sharing it openly and having other people add their insights to it. And it's really helped me appreciate what's so important about having lifelong friends, and appreciate why Elliot and I have stuck together for this long. And it's been really wonderful. And I have loved this opportunity to look at it, a retrospective from all these years, and reaffirm why it is that we love each other so much. So this was so great.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this. I feel like I gained a lot more insight into why our friendship works so well. Mm-hmm. And as much as I appreciated our friendship before, I feel like this helped me appreciate what we have even more, and that we can share it with our partners as well. I think was really helpful and impactful for me, because I actually didn't realize how much from our relationship I took and put into Anna and I's relationship.
Me neither.
And I think that was really cool insight to get. And I really had a good time. I always have a good time talking with you guys, but this was a really cool opportunity. So,
and from the outside looking in, your relationship is just so pure and so incredible. And we need more relationships like this and friendships like this out in the world. This needs to be visible.
Yeah.
Because it's so valuable.
Did you feel the love? Because I felt the love. I appreciate how throughout this episode, we didn't just talk about authenticity and being ourselves and just how amazing this friendship is, because it is that. But we also talked about how it's not just being ourselves when it feels easy and we are being accepted, but also being ourselves when we're struggling or are a little uncomfortable and maybe doubting whether we should show up that way or not. You got to hear the processing of a real friendship in real time. None of this was scripted or planned, and you got to see us navigate the throes of humanity. Every single one of us, not just the four of us in this episode, but all of us, can struggle to show up in spaces as our authentic selves. And this is why finding little bubbles where you can be completely you is important. It gives you space to be supported, and maybe even process the times where you felt like you had to fit into a box, or understand the patterns in a way that feels authentic for you. Just like you witnessed here. Hopefully something we talked about today resonated with you. If it did, let yourself sit with that idea for a little while longer. If you have any questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at Insights With Us Podcast, or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. If you want to support the continuation of this podcast, you can donate. To do so, visit my website and donate on Podbean's patron program, or find me, Anastasia Soroka, on buymeacoffee.com. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are listening. Thank you for creating insight with us.